EA Sports. Big.
Hi everybody, welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast, retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. I'd forgot what I was going to say there.
Did you nearly forget that?
Yeah, I did, yeah. My name's Faz.
And I'm Rich.
Welcome to the pod this week. We are in our staple environment of Rich's spare bedroom and or office come boudoir.
I mean, yeah, you're not wrong.
I've never known what a boudoir is.
Bedroom.
Is it?
Yeah.
No. I always imagine it's like the Moulin Rouge.
I mean, this is not like the Moulin Rouge. If the Moulin Rouge is like this, then
what have you got around that could be Moulin Rouge? I mean, I kind of looked at like a medal, a running Leeds Abbey Dash medal from 2019.
Have you ever actually seen Moulin Rouge?
Do they not all wear like
it's
medals for charity in Moulin Rouge?
Spangly, I suppose, but yeah.
I know. No, got it wrong. Uma Thurman? No, the other one. Not Uma Thurman.
Nicole Kidman?
Thank you.
Who is it?
Yeah.
Why do I know that?
She's not in the boudoir today. Anyway.
Nor is Ewan McGregor.
No, that's disappointing, isn't it?
It is. The guy can
He just
sing.
popped up and went, hello there. That'd be great. So, what we're talking about?
EA Big. And the gin and tonic IPA.
Cool. Let's start talking about beers. We talked about beers quite a significant amount in the last two podcasts with Aaron being here, so we won't dabble too much in them, but I picked up a couple today that had just come live in the shop that I work in, because I'm lazy like that. Although, to be fair, I wasn't in the shop. I actively went to the shop just to see what was going on. And we have got to start off with in today's pod. What? Botanicalist? Botanicalist. That is the word.
Yeah.
I thought you were a botanist. Clever. They've changed the word. Anyway, Magic Rock Brewing from Huddersfield, I think they're still there, have crossed with Mason's gin makers of Yorkshire to make a gin and tonic IPA. I haven't tried mine yet, and I'm eating nuts, so that will probably flavour it, but have you had a little dabble?
I have, yep, and it does taste like a cross between a gin and tonic and an IPA.
That's good.
So
that's really nice.
Job done. Personally, not a huge fan of gin and tonic.
No, well,
so
yeah. Am I not? I wouldn't ever pick it as a drink, but if someone gave me a gin and tonic, and said this is your drink for the night, you can have 5 gin and tonics, I'd be like, I wouldn't be upset. I'd be okay with it. It's very, in the middle.
I think I'd be a little bit upset. and I'll tell you why, actually, because it's just hit me with that mouthful as well. It's the tonic. Like, I've never been a huge fan of tonic. I can always taste it kind of in the back of my throat, and it just that kind of gassy kind of thing.
Quinine.
I went to a gin festival once and basically bitched about it all the way around because of the gin and tonic, and then someone served me gin with ginger beer or something like that, and I was like, oh, okay, right, I've been doing it wrong. I get it now.
Ah, that's interesting, yeah. I guess I've never really had gin with anything else because everyone just thinks that tonic's the one, isn't it? But it is a very distinct taste, tonic.
Yeah, and it's just one that I've never quite gelled with. And credit where credit's due, you can taste a kind of tonic-y undertone, I think. So that's what it says on the tin.
Yeah. I taste salty peanuts. So there we go.
Yeah.
I like it when IPAs mix with stuff. I think I've probably spoke about it on the Pick Up a Penguin podcast before, and it was one called Stormy Weather, and it was an Earl Grey IPA, an Earl Grey tea IPA, and it is unreal. And they're I think they might be from down your way in Reading, maybe. Really? I think but they don't. And we could pick them up in one of our local shops, Jim's, that's closed now. So sad times that I can't seem to find it anywhere or buy it on the internet even. So they have one can available. I'm not even joking. Literally one can of one drink available on their website. So I kind of feel like they're going through a change or they've shut down. But
I'll tell you what, have you ever had that thing where you have a drink that you really, really like, and then you can't find it anywhere for more money, and you can't get it on the website or anything like that, and then you find one can of it somewhere? Like, I had that when we were in Brid.
Do you open it up?
And, well, do you remember, I don't know if I've talked about it on here before, but the Vocation in Kirkstall Brewery 666, like a really dark coffee-ish stout. Like, I know we talked about beer rankings with Aaron last time. Like, that is up there for me. Like, it was awesome. Couldn't get it on the website anymore. Couldn't get it in shops anymore. Then we were in Brid and they had one can left in a tiny little pub. And yeah, we had that moment of like, do we open it? Do we not? And then we split it on my birthday. So it's like,
that's
you know
the
what?
thing. You're always going to have to do that at some point, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not
And
just going to sit there looking sadly at a can.
And you may as well get... A lot of people do.
Well, yeah, true.
So you may as well have it while it's fresh.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The devil is in the detail with that 666. Just get that
Hey.
in there. I mean, it was really forced, but whatever.
Yeah, fine.
So, thinking, how do I segue from
Oh, this would be good.
that? Yeah, I know, that would be good. No, it'll come, maybe.
Devil, big corporation EA.
Yes, well done. Excellent.
Is that all right?
Yeah, we are, it seems, without even trying, and I'm going to be honest, one of the upcoming podcasts is the exact same as well. Is it going to be another EA sort of thing? Like, certainly I seem to be as well. An EA bitch. I am I'm a stooge to their whatever.
It's pronounced EA big.
All right. Bitch. And I am shoveling their shovelware. Like, and I don't.
Yeah, you really are.
I don't give a
shovel.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't mean to, but I guess one of the things I wanted to talk about really was that the PSP seems to just be laden with EA games. Like,
they did support it, like, and I mean, like, capital S.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that it would have been half, certainly in the Western Hemisphere, there would have been half the amount of games available if EA hadn't even thought, oh, we're going to publish some shit. So, at least I appreciate them for that. So let's start at the beginning then. EA Sports, big. I just thought I'd throw that.
Well taken.
Thank you.
Nice.
Yeah. No. So the series then, I believe, started with SSX on the PlayStation 2 in the year 2000. When I say I believe, I read that.
That's a Wikipedia fact.
Although, to be fair, that it is, but I am going to give myself a little bit of credit on that, in so much that I did own SSX for the PlayStation 2 in the year 2000, and it was like one of my first games I ever had for the PlayStation 2. So I have grown with this series since its infancy, and even prior to that. So I guess before it actually became EA Sports Big, the studio, I think it's like EA Canada maybe, they released Sledstorm for the PlayStation 1, and I was a massive advocate of that, and friends listening to the podcast that I used to play PlayStation 1 with, they would know that I used to, that was, when you take games round to your friend's house,
Yep.
and there's only so many games you can carry in a backpack. Well, maybe I could probably carry loads, but like, I'd always take Sledstorm with me. It always felt like a great multiplayer game to be cracking on with, and my friends agreed as well. And and they remade or remastered, I think, whatever, they made another Sledstorm for the PlayStation 2. And so it wasn't Sledstorm 2, it was just Sledstorm again. Sledstorm rides again. And so I started off really, really before the studio even knew it was. I knew what EA
I was there before it was cool.
Exactly, I knew what it was going to do before it even fucking knew itself. So yeah, I make no apologies for being an EA Sports big fan, and so we're going to talk about the series a little bit today. So little things included in the series then: NFL Street, NBA Street, FIFA Street, Def Jam series, SSX as aforementioned, Sledstorms. I think there's a couple more in there as well that I can't quite remember. Probably don't need my time.
Extreme Pog or something.
Yeah. I'd love that.
Street.
Did you collect Pogs?
Yeah, once upon a time.
Yeah. Premier League Pogs I used to collect.
Really?
Yeah, I think we might have introduced it on the pod before. Slammers were like the thing. To try and get a purple slammer, it was like, you really wanted a purple slammer in your snack. But much like Pokemon cards, no one ever really played Pogs properly, like the actual rules of Pogs. Yeah. It was just like, I've collected the whole of Manchester United, and now I'm going to smash my slammer at this stack. And then it'd be like, oh, do you want to keep, do you want to play for keeps? No, you fucking mental.
Yeah.
These cost like 35p a pack. Like, as in, like, I'm not going to like waste the rest of my money and give you the half of my fucking Crystal Palace team. I'm going to give you Brian Gunn from Norwich because you slammed a fucking piece of plastic on him. It's not okay. So, yeah, I've got...
Feel better?
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, Pogs. Awesome. And where was I? Anyway, so what are your relations with the EA Sports Big series?
Infrequent and few and far between.
We're back in the boudoir.
FIFA Street, I dabbled with. SSX Tricky was probably the big one for me. It was one of those things that I don't ever really remember owning any of them. I think they were the kinds of things that I would rent quite a lot. I say quite a lot. I'd rent them if everything else was out. And like I wouldn't ever begrudge picking them up or anything like that. So yeah, it's kind of only been relatively recently that I've played more of them.
Okay.
And yeah, it was always the SSX stuff for me. Trying to fill the 1080 snowboarding gap in my life.
Oh yeah. Is that N64 then?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool Borders, was that a PlayStation or on N64?
PlayStation,
yeah.
I think. Yeah.
And the snowboarding games are a bit of a funny one, really, because I think everyone wants to play them, but no one truly loves them. Like they're like sort of like a Tony Hawk sort of situation.
Yeah,
like,
they never seem to be a thing in and of themselves.
No, there's a lot of them. To be fair, though, if you consider the entirety of the SSX, and then that you say, when you've got your 1080 snowboard and Cool Borders.
Shout out to Sean White on the Xbox 360.
Yeah, so I've got a Sean White snowboarding on the PSP that I didn't have a dabble with this time around, but I will have a little look at some point. Maybe even review it for the pod, and it would be terrible. But and also those. What else was there? Oh, like the mini games in like Final Fantasy VII. Like,
didn't everybody hate that?
Yeah, I don't know why. Like, I mean, like, so from a point of view of it, the way that was, I guess, the hitbox really on you against like a giant snowman was shit. But that part of the game in Final Fantasy VII is like, it's pretty cool. Like, is in
cool.
I really enjoy that continent in Final Fantasy VII when you climb up the ice wall and stuff forever. And it's like the ladder on Metal Gear Solid 3. I just like the pain. And also the pain of the snowboarding. Clearly, I've got a real thing going on there. So hurt me, Cloud.
Anyway.
Sorry, I've really tangented today so far. There's been no segue into things. It's just been fucking...
It's like watching a pinball machine of thought.
I'm really sorry. I will bring myself back in, and I'm going to start this week, I think, and talk a little bit more about SSX then. So the game I reviewed this week is SSX on Tour. But I also did go back and dabble a little bit with SSX 3 and SSX 2012, which was the final iteration of SSX. And I think that might have been the last EA Big. In fact, EA Big had actually folded.
Was it that sort of thing where the thing had folded partway through development or something?
Yeah, and so EA just released it as an EA game. So I've had a little dabble with those really, and also NFL Street 3 for the PSP. And I think maybe, should we do a little bit of a bouncy where I do a little bit of SSX, then you do yours, which is Def Jam Vendetta.
On the PS2, because I couldn't find anything on the Vita because it was already long dead by then.
That's fine. That's okay. But we said on the build-up to the pod that, I think it's fair to include a Def Jam game, even if it is on the PlayStation 2. It's fine.
Yeah, who's going to stop me?
Yeah, exactly. We're
We're
making our own rule. I haven't yet. And then we'll come and then bounce back to me on NFL Street, so
Sure.
No one's not bored by our fucking voices, constant, memorandum about a certain game.
I particularly enjoyed Faz's 45-minute
Points of
Sports
view.
Big.
Points of view. Like Terry Wogan getting written into. He's dead. Right. Isn't he? Yeah, he is. Yeah,
I think so.
Oh, sorry, Sir Terry. Anyway, I'll have these nuts and shut up. So, EA Sports Big. started with SSX, and probably I think the heart of the series belongs to SSX. So it wasn't a surprise to see it go over to the PlayStation Portable in 2005. The game itself is a bit of a hodgepodge between SSX 3 for consoles and SSX on Tour for consoles, in so much that it takes facets of both of them and places it onto the portable system. The amount of times that I feel like I've said that so far about games moving to the PSP is vast. So an example would be Burnout. I'm fairly certain I said that about Burnout 3 and Burnout Takedown. I think they kind of like...
They were EA as well, weren't they?
Yeah, and they were a mix. And they were a mix that went onto the PSP. Like a slimmed down version of both those games kind of posited together.
Yep.
And Tony Hawk's as well. I think I said that about Tony Hawk's. It kind of felt like a bit of a hodgepodge of sort of like underground / like a smaller version of the game. And it kind of got moved over to PSP. What it makes it sound like I'm being quite derogatory about that. In this circumstance, when I played these games, it felt like actually it was probably a bit of a positive. I think it took what it was really good at on the console and slimmed it down, and actually that probably made it a bit better than what I experienced when I played on SSX3. So SSX3, I'd say, is probably there or thereabouts being the best in the series. I mean, Tricky's really great, 3's really good, and I'll get onto the SSX 2012 as well, that came out on the Xbox 360 and PS3. But 3 was really good, but it did feel like sometimes they kind of started to try to be like introduce a little bit of an open worldy sort of feel, and the levels kind of sprawled everywhere. Whereas actually having the slimmed down in your pocket version of that,
A bit more focused.
yeah, it kind of worked. Yeah, almost like I thought it was better for it really. So SSX on Tour for the PSP is one of those games where there was some really great stuff to it, and some stuff that kind of like let it down a little bit, like enough to be like, oh right, okay, you feel like you've got the makings of a really great game, but there's enough things in there to kind of go, oh, that really bothers me. And I hate that with a game sometimes, because you kind of go, oh well, you know, I'm having a great time. Oh, I physically and also metaphorically hit a tree. Like, as in, you know, like, so there's stuff in there that it does stop you a little bit in your path. One of those things that I think that I've always found about the SSX series as a whole, though, is they're quite tricky.
Hey.
I've never spoke to anybody out loud about this before. This is like a problem, clearly, or like a therapy sort of thing. But I find SSX games quite hard. And what I mean by that is that you have to score really high to medal. Like, and you've got to be able to combine all your tricks really well, which I get is the concept of the game.
Yeah.
But it's very lumpy in difficulty. So I would find that some of these modes, while I was on SSX on Tour, I would find that some of the modes I didn't have to try at all, and I'd medal gold. Like I didn't have to barely do anything, and I'd medal gold straight away. It was just like a walk in the park. And some of them, I was visibly sweating, like trying to medal.
Hear the thing creaking.
Yeah, pretty much. And you know when you just scrape a bronze, and you're like, that's enough. I've done enough. Like, as in, I have aced that level. Like, as in, you know, like that's
never
awesome.
Need to see it ever again.
I know. Yeah, I've done enough to medal and pass to the next thing. And that just brings something up in my mind about games where it's like you have to get a medal to get to the next thing. Sometimes that fucks me off, because I'm like, you've made this really weirdly hard, like, and I don't know why. Like, as in, you know, it's meant to be fun. And I find that with SSX and this game especially as well, there was things where it was like you just had really breezy, easy parts, and then just, I think that even on the first sort of like rung of the way that they structure the game is that you just go up these different levels, and you become a more renowned, I was going to say skater there, snowboarder, snow surfer. You become a more renowned snow surfer, and you build up, and it's just basically an arbitrary number. And you know how much we love those. And you build your way up the leaderboard while you're on tour. But weirdly enough, like the first sort of level of some of the actual mountains that you are gonna snow surf down. I can't stop saying it now. I can't.
It's alright, keep talking. I'm just making notes to myself to go by 1080 Avalanche on the GameCube and Kelly Slater Pro Surfer. Keep going.
So being a snowboarder, and it's like, and some of the levels are just ridiculously hard, and I just don't understand why at the start of the game it's like, this is exactly what you want. It's like, oh yeah, hit a brick.
For pain.
Yeah, it's like hit a brick wall straight away. You're like, fuck you, game. Like, like there was a couple of times I am not a controller.
No, you're not a controller.
I'm not a controller.
You're a real boy, Faz.
I am not a thrower of the controller when I'm angry. But the PSP has got a perfect weight for feeling like that. Like as in. It would go.
You could do some damage if you tried.
To the PSP. And there were a couple of times where I was like, just at the beginning of my journey on this game, I was like, fuck me, fuck you. Like, it's just so annoying. For an arcadey kind of game, which the very first SSX, I remember being much more simulation based. Then Tricky came along, and they just completely went out the fucking window.
This.
Yeah, just like went crazy. And then from then, I think everyone's memory of SSX is that actually it's a bit fun and zany, and you get your Max and people like that. And but actually, I'd say On Tour brings it a bit more back, a little bit more simulation-y, and you could definitely seem to get that feel of difficulty with that as well. Positives though. And I did say there was quite a lot of positives, really. How it handled, and from going from a game that is quite reliant on a dual analog stick, where you do all your spinning and all your directions at speed, to go down to one little nubbin on your PSP and have to use your shoulder buttons a lot more for rotation and things, it does really well. Like it ports over so well. Like, and you could actually use your analog stick on the PSP, whereas you go back to another 2005 game, Tony Hawk's Underground 2, then you can only use your directional pad. That is immediately, it gets an extra point from me compared to what that is, because actually you can do a lot more damage and a lot better work on your board than you could do on Tony Hawk. So, trying to get the direction of landing whatever the equivalent of a varial heel flip or something. I know my skateboarding. Trying to do a trick and then doing it with the analog stick, it was just so much better. And it really felt sharp in the controls as well. And again, it shocked me that I was like, this is 2005, and actually this feels like one of the sharpest games that I've ever played on the PSP in terms of how it controlled. And that's lucky, because it needs it, because the camera angle that you have to maneuver down the mountain with your snowboarder is fucking shocking. Like, it is like, it is over your shoulder to the point where it's like it may as well clipped onto your shoulder, and you're flying down these mountains at like 1,000, what feels like 1,000 miles an hour, and you're going in the dark sometimes over trees and things, and it's just it becomes almost impossible sometimes down some of these, especially when you're in the versus mode against just one other snowboarder. I must have tried 15-20 times to beat the CPU at that, just on the first level again.
Yep.
Of the difficulty. Couldn't do it. Just could not do that, or couldn't medal. Could not beat the versus mode. And I was just like, and a lot of that was down to not knowing the track well enough, and then that camera angle just being up your ass, like is in, and it's just like very difficult to kind of be able to get enough points doing tricks coming off ledges that you had no idea that were coming up, even if you had tried 5 or 6 times. I just didn't understand it. I don't know why they just didn't drop it back. Like another sort of, I guess, another 10 meters in game meters. It would have made way more sense to have more of a view. And I wonder if it's just to do with the size of the screen or something. Or...
I wonder if it's the processing or something like that on the PSP itself, because you don't have to bring the camera much further back to have a lot more geometry in the scene.
That
and I can imagine
sense.
if they were trying to make it go fast, I could imagine that a conversation might have been had between speed and having a view of someone's arse.
And that might be the case because, again, on the plus side of it, the speed with which it renders is exceptional. And that'll be why, probably then, thinking about it out loud now, it does a really good job of dealing with that fast downhill feel. So if that is a payoff of having a tight angle, then fair enough. I guess that, but yeah. And speaking of speed, you really have to in some of the medal races. It's a 4-minute race,
Right.
for the heat, and then another 4-minute race to medal. Just one event. So you're talking about 8 minutes of snowboarding just to get one event done out of like 64 events, and it's an extensive amount of time, especially if you fail. Like if you get if you do the heat and then don't medal, you're talking about doing it again. It didn't really feel like it was over as quick as it should be. Like as for a race time, it was just a lot of effort to put into one heat to be able to do a really, to enjoy, really. Do you know what I mean? So there were times where I thought, God, this is going on for ages, and it did. So it was really rather annoying. But overall, as a game, as an SSX game as well, I thought it did a really good job of porting over to the PSP. I know I've got a couple of gripes with it, but in terms of speed and even the look as well, so I'm gonna speak out of two sides of my mouth here. EA's menus, songs, vibe of that era, all the PSP games are all so cookie cutter. It's incredible, but to an impressive amount, to the point where you're like, wow, they've done a really good job of just being like, this is brand EA. It's just like, it doesn't matter if you're playing Burnout, it doesn't matter if you're playing SSX, it doesn't matter if you're playing FIFA. You get all the same sort of like indie alt rock songs. You get all the same sort of like, and just a little bit of a tweak on a theme in so much like for this one, I read on the console versions, they've kind of made it a bit of a comic book, scribbly, pencily sort of menu vibe. And they've managed to get that across the PSP pretty well. But again, it's just like, we're a little bit off the beaten path, kind of like, but we're still sporty EA. And it's just, you can't believe how well they've managed to just kind of maintain that brand across all these different games.
Yeah, some tight guidelines.
Yeah, it really is, yeah. And I'm like, well done you for being so ordered. Well done for being so orderly. Like the Nazis, like as in they had one thing going for them, and that was order. Wait, disorder?
Yeah, Nazis didn't have anything going for them.
No,
Nazis were terrible.
Yes, yeah, they probably were. And so, and this isn't terrible. This isn't a Nazi game. This is, this game is, I would say, great in parts, like really, truly great in parts. And just with some drawbacks. So I'd say a 7 out of 10 probably for that. And
put it on the spreadsheet now.
Not to want to bang on because I know I want to get onto other games as well, but I'll probably stay a little bit with SSX and just talk a little bit about the 2012 version on the PS3 and Xbox 360. That game takes everything from before it. It didn't get amazing reviews, but it takes all the best bits of SSX, puts them all together. It adds a couple of things, like it does make it like, I think the idea is that you're challenging deadly descents against somebody else that is in a previous member of the SSX team, and he's like racing ahead of you around the world, and you've got to catch up with him. And each area only has, I think, 3 or 4 different events, but it's pretty cool. And the levels on that, it's so much fun. It feels like really rough terrain that, like, actually, it's not perfect. There's lots of different little routes and stuff, but it does back off the camera angle, and it goes at the right speed. But it mixes in the simulation very easily into the absolute insanity of the tricky world. And it even has, like, at the bottom, like the power bar, and then when the power bar gets filled up, it goes, it's tricky. You're like, yeah! Fucking brilliant. So it is cool that it kind of still, it seems to have a really good balance of both. You can go crazy with points if you want to, or you can get down the mountain as fast as you possibly can as well, and hold the line. And I didn't realise, I knew I had this game and I knew I'd played it before, but going back to it again now, 11 years old now, so officially retro, really, really good. And it definitely felt like the best point of the SSX series almost came at the end after EA Big had closed down, which is a shame. Yeah. But if you haven't played any SSX games, or you want to pick up the best ones, I'd say Tricky or SSX 3 on the console, or on the next generation, go for SSX from 2012 as well. They're just brilliant games, and I don't think you'll ever not have fun with them. On tour with the PSP version and stuff, great in parts, but struggled in other as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's me on my SSX jaunt.
So I'm going to do Def Jam Vendetta. So did you, back in the day on the N64, did you ever play WWF No Mercy?
I played it around at my friend's house. I have very little memory of it.
Okay,
but I remember it being something I enjoyed. And
I don't remember actively hating it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I picked this up a while back because I was starting to collect games again. I haven't got an N64 and I don't have the Switch Online stuff that gives you N64 games, but also because of the licenses and all that kind of stuff, it's exactly the kind of game that the chance of a re-release is slim to nil. But the people that made it, AKI or Aki, however we're saying it, we'll go with AKI, developed Def Jam Vendetta for EA Sports Big.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, hello, cheeky. Let's see what this is all about.
Back in the boudoir.
Well, I missed No Mercy, and that kind of like, it sounds stupid, but like there are some animations in it that I remember vividly, like when two people run into each other and kind of do like they puff their chests out and all that kind of stuff, or like similarly for blocking, or like the whole like weak and strong grappling system and things like that. And it seemed to be the sort of thing that was kind of lost to time. You didn't see it too much. I think it's starting to make a little bit of a comeback, that kind of control scheme. But there was definitely a bit of a period where everything wrestling wise seemed to lurch violently more towards your kind of SmackDown style of play from the PlayStation.
So was the N64 versions of the wrestling games then, not to go back into the wrestling pod, were they vastly different from the PlayStation one? Because from what I hear, it sounds like they were
I would argue they were. Yeah, they were. Certainly compared to like SmackDown and stuff like that, they were much slower.
Okay.
Like, don't get me wrong, still goofy as hell. But they were a little bit more, like, to me, they always felt a bit more considered.
Okay.
And whereas SmackDown, like, I tried playing Here Comes the Pain on the PS2 recently, and it was almost so fast I couldn't play it. Like, I really struggled to keep up with
the
what was
actual
going on.
pain of my hands. They were right in the title.
And it was like I always gelled more with the control scheme on the N64 ones, and AKI's games specifically. Like, I always got on with it. Like, it was always their games that I played various wrestling games of theirs over the years, and it was always theirs that I stuck with on the N64.
They had to slow you down for the terrible controller.
Well, it worked. You know.
What was with that little yellow thing on it?
What, the C buttons?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, they seemed weird at the time, but actually some of my favourite controllers have, like, 6 face buttons, because it's kind of like a fight pad.
Yeah.
So actually, like, as soon as I started seeing it like that, I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of get the N64 controller now.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Sorry.
So fast forward to checking the back of the box, 2003. And we've got Def Jam Vendetta, and you saying about like SSX and the EA brand guidelines and how we're a bit indie-ish and a bit like rock and roll and that. This is very hip-hop. And there are a bunch of hip-hop artists in it that you have to unlock. So like big selling point is like featuring DMX and Method Man and friends, and you can't play as any of them. You have to unlock them all. So there's a story mode. There's like a kind of 4-person battle royale type thing, and that's about it. I checked the manual just before you came over, and I think it actually says 4 match types.
Wow.
Which, like, considering even the N64 games, I think there's more than that in there. So it kind of feels like the wrestling elements of it are a bit of a dead weight. And I need to kind of explain that. So like the whole conceit is this, the fact you're going through like this kind of underground fighting scene in New York.
Yeah. Which we all know that the world's biggest hip-hop artists are doing right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. But in that, and between that and the fact that it's an EA Sports big thing.
That's great.
Thank you, I've been practicing. 6 hours a day. Over and over again. Like it feels like a weird mash of styles. It feels like AKI wanted to make a wrestling game again. EA Sports big were like, can you make it a big arcade fighter, please? And they've kind of gone for a middle ground. And for me, he says, eyeballing the 9 out of 10 from PSW magazine on the front, it doesn't really work.
Oh.
I can see what they're trying to do. Don't get me wrong. It feels like a proof of concept. So part of that problem, the crux of it, is that you're in this nasty underground fighting tournament, and you're still in a ring, and you're still kind of doing the AKI wrestling thing. You know, you're still doing the same moves. Like, literally, a lot of the same animations are in there. It's just that people will jump a bit higher, or they will hit a bit faster. Like, it's almost like they're sped up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that was partly in response to the SmackDown kind of stuff, which is why I banged on about it earlier. And so it kind of, between that and things like, you build up your momentum meter and you get pumped by the crowd and all that, and everything's going great, and your opponent is, on their last legs, and then you trigger like a special move, and that's it. You knock the person out, and it's over. And it feels almost more like a fatality from Mortal Kombat than a wrestling move. And obviously, like you can have knockout victories in No Mercy or any number of wrestling games.
Yeah.
But I don't remember them feeling quite as prescribed or like telegraphed. Whereas in this, it's like, okay, win button time, and it. Like, I didn't ever win by pinfall. It was only ever by knockout, because I knew I just had to get
to the special.
Yeah, and that was that. And if you're not in that position, like if your opponent isn't like sufficiently, beaten down by the time you get to it, you'll still do a ton of damage. You just won't knock them out. So like, it's not a given, but at the same time, it felt like too much of a given. a lot of the time. And so like, at the same time, because you've got a ring and like the wrestling kind of trappings around it, it's really hard to buy into that as like a gritty underground fighting tournament thing.
Yeah.
And so it's just, it feels like a bit of a weird halfway house. And I say that because I checked some of the reviews for the sequel to this, Fight for New York, and that was where it hit its stride by the look of it, because they get rid of the fucking ring.
Yeah. Like,
you're on the floor, there is a crowd around you, you can use the crowd. They put weapons back in. I couldn't find any in this. I don't think they're in there.
Oh.
It feels like, especially having played a load of wrestling games, having watched a shit ton of it recently, it feels like even with the wrestling side of things, they could have gone further with it. Like, wrestling is all about campy, insane hijinks. And, a shit ton of bloodletting back in the day.
They're never in the ring in wrestling.
Yeah.
In fact, wait a minute. Did I see a video the other day of, was it Edge getting into a bed with Ita, I believe she was called? And they were like
Lita?
I can't remember now. They were taking their clothes off in a bed in the ring in front of like
I think that
10,000 people or something. And then Ric Flair just walks out, and I was like, this is great. I was like, what's going on?
Wrestling lost something when it went PG. But it's that kind of like utter insanity that it feels like this game was like crying out for, and it just stopped short of it. Whereas Fight for New York, it seems as though they kind of lent into it a bit more. And, you could have Henry Rollins getting hit by a train and stuff like that, where it's, it definitely feels more like they went, okay, let's do our own thing now, rather than still trying to be wrestling.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, like, it is still great to look at, it is fun to play, it scratches a kind of nostalgia itch, but at the same time, it's like, well, the animations are the same, but it's not No Mercy. And dare I say it, nowadays, for use of the control scheme that I was talking about earlier and things like that, I would rather be playing Day of Reckoning on the GameCube and play like a proper wrestling game where I could hit someone with a baseball bat if I fancy it. And, stuff like that.
Like in real life.
Like in proper wrestling. And, considering half of the... I'm looking at the box, right? The massive necklace that someone's hurling around and stuff like that. Why aren't I wrapping that around my fists and using that as an impromptu knuckle duster? It feels like it was pulling its punches, if you'll excuse the laboured pun. And yeah, so it's. I know. I sound down on it. I think, if anything, I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. And it is good. It is very well regarded. It did something different, but it feels, especially compared to what I've seen of the sequel and fulfilling that kind of potential, it doesn't feel like it's its own thing enough. And you can see the through thread. You can see what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
But it definitely needed the sequel to actually make good on the promise.
Yeah. It feels like they've just taken a previous game, put a license
reskinned
over
it, and then yeah. Like that is almost exactly what it feels like. I would love to know if that was the case, because like knowing what we know now about how the console generations went and timings of various bits and bobs, that is exactly what it feels like.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good. I started this weighing up whether I wanted to give it a 6 or a 7.
Mm-hmm.
A 7 feels optimistic. A 6 feels harsh.
Yeah.
So I'm very much on the fence, and I'm gonna give it a 7 because like it's not all it could be.
It doesn't sound too dissimilar from what I was trying to say about mine. Like, do you know what I mean? It was like it's got great bits, but it's not all it can be. Yeah, and that's where we're landing.
It's missing a certain something.
That's where 7 games live. 7 out of 10 games live.
Yeah, just shy of greatness.
Yeah, I'm really worried that when we get to the turn of the year and we start to rank our games within their number, sort of, I guess, I don't know what it's called, rankings, categories, barriers. I don't know. And there's a lot of 8s and 7s. Some games are going to get fucked, basically. So, thank you for that. And so you never played... Have you never played New York then? I haven't either, but I've heard really good things about it. So
I looked into it after playing this and seeing a couple of reviews. I was like, actually, you know what? I bet that would be a hell of a lot of fun. I looked into it, and it still sells for about 30 quid.
I was going to say it's still hard to get hold of.
It's so it's one of those ones that maybe at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, not yet.
I think Vendetta is worth a little bit, isn't it, as well? Both worth a little bit.
I don't think so.
Right.
So much anymore.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah, I don't regret having time with it or anything like that. I'm not going to go and exchange it, but at the same time, yeah, I was happier playing other things very quickly.
Yeah, cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about NFL Street 3. So when I first had a PSP, I had
Threet. I
had NFL Street 2. In my first rodeo with a PSP, and I had really fond memories of that. And they were crushed by NFL Street 3 this time round. I think the NFL Street games were diminishing returns, but because I think the most maligned one was the NFL. I think it's On Tour. I think maybe, and that was sort of like a 2009 game, and it's a bit weird, really. I think that they just started to just seep into just being Madden, and you could probably add modes in Madden to make they try to keep NFL Street and FIFA Street going. There was another version of each kind of on I think it was PS3. Like, again, in the similar vein with SSX, sort of same area, 2012-ish. But when a sport is a sport, that is, do you really need to make an arcadey version of it and make it into different sort of modes? I think you do, but probably within that main game. I think for a value for money sort of thing, yeah. I think you end up just with like the training modes in FIFA, didn't you? Before games and stuff. I think the same sort of thing could be said for NFL Street, really. Certainly this version. I think NFL Street 2, from what I remember of it, and we don't do many memory review games or anything, but certainly I have distinct memories of it being very good as a PSP port, and even in the PlayStation 2, and I spent a lot of time with that game, and it played really well, and I remember that being a really good multiplayer experience. This game didn't seem to do anything different from that game, and actually it seemed to degrade when it came into the mini-game sort of thing. So there's two different ways you play the game. There was the sort of mini-game version of it, the exhibition modes, and then there's the longer career mode. And the longer career mode definitely had a bit more to it. and I think probably saved this from being a really bad review, if I'm going to be honest. I think that was called like Respect the Street mode. That felt in depth enough to that feel like you didn't need almost the little mini modes in there as well. Like you basically in that mode, in the Respect the Street, the main career mode, you build up your own team. You can add stats, customize all your characters and things. Graphically, it's there's a lot left wanting really for graphics in these games. They could have been a lot better, I think, really, especially when you look at SSX from the same sort of era. And I think this is a 2008 game, I think, maybe NFL Street 3, and it looks worse than 2005 SSX. But, and it's trying to recreate actual football players from that era. But Peyton Manning looks like he's been through a fucking grinder. It's just like, it's awful, So yeah, the main mode, you build up your team, and that feels really kind of neat and fun to do. And there's a massive amount of challenges to do, and they do have some variants on them. It's not just go and win a game here in this part of the country, go and win a game here in this part of the country. There is that element to it, but every single challenge is different. Sort of like, oh, go and score 40 points in this game against this team, or go and score 3 special touchdowns in this game or whatever, whilst having the special bar full. It did have a good variance on it. The bit, like I said, that let it down were the mini games. There was one that was Crush the Carrier, which basically is just like a King of the Hill mode, where you are a running back, you pick a running back, and then there's other running backs in a little arena, and it feels impossible to win. So you have the ball to start off with, and then you genuinely just get crushed straight away, and then someone else is running away with the ball. The only way you can earn points is by tackling them, but they always seem to be way quicker than you. No matter what you do with the boost button or anything like that, there's no clever way to click it and sort of maybe click it on and off and get quicker. You just don't seem to struggle compared to the CPU. It's shit. It's not good. Another mini mode was a 1 versus 1 running back battle, where you have to score. You get 10 chances to score a touchdown against each other, and then the most touchdowns wins. Again, that felt very difficult to do. So it almost felt like the CPU was always quicker than you. And it's like, well, that's fine. I mean, I don't mind having a modicum of difficulty to it, but at the same time, I have to be able to do it. I have to be able to complete the game. And it just didn't feel like that was possible, really, in that mode. Jump ball challenge as well, which is, the concept is quite fun. So, we've done this drill in flag training where, you'd send off 2 people, 3 people, facing away from the quarterback, and then the quarterback would shout or whatever, and actually you got to turn around and catch the jump ball. And so that little mini game, I was like, oh great, I've done this in real life, and again, execution of it, the tracking of the ball and where it said it was going to go, and you go in there to press the button to catch, just never seemed to marry up as well as it should do. Everything felt off in the little mini games, whereas actually playing the main mode, playing the game where I guess you would call the traditional NFL Street game as a career was worthwhile. So yeah, I guess the general core idea of the NFL Street games always felt really cool. This one never felt anywhere near as good as NFL Street 2, where it felt like that was just fully involved in that in the career mode, that type of game. So yeah, it's a bit of a funny one, really. I'd say I'd give it a 5 out of 10. I think that is in just about worth playing, but you're better picking up NFL Street 2 if you've got a PSP than you are playing NFL Street 3. If I'm going to be honest, and probably over any other NFL Street game, NFL Street 2 would be the one I'd recommend from what I remember anyway. So yeah, I mean, they were the kind of games that we played so far this week. Have you got any further memories of playing any more EA big games?
Is that a list of them?
There is a list. I mean, it's a very grimy photo of a tier maker from a chap called Square Pegs on YouTube. Square Pegs. He used to work for EA. And he makes videos about video games, but he's done a tier maker. I mean, I've already spoke a little bit about Sledstorm. I don't really remember. I definitely would have owned the PS2 version, but I think I remember more about playing that PlayStation 1 version before it became EA big, because that doesn't really count. But, I absolutely loved Sledstorm. I think, looking at Square Peg's list and thing, he's got in his top tier, Def Jam Vendetta, funnily enough. And I can't even see Def Jam Fight for New York, so whether or not that was actually...
That wasn't EA Big.
That'd be why.
Yeah, it was later on. Yeah.
So, and then he's got NBA. So NBA Street, we haven't talked about them.
Yeah,
I don't really remember playing them, but they seem to be quite well reviewed across the board.
Yeah, I think I possibly played either the first one or the second one, like once upon a time. But whenever I think of like arcade basketball, it's always NBA Jam.
Yeah.
Or the arcade mode on NBA Courtside 2002.
Nice.
So yeah, like NBA Street, if I did play it, it either wasn't for long or it didn't leave much of an impression.
I feel like the reason that probably would be, and this is obviously me painting it with a wide brush, not ever playing them, but surely NBA Street is just basketball. Like, it's in like just 3 people instead of 5. Do you know what I mean? Like,
You jump a bit higher, or like you could dunk from full court,
yeah, and
or
do a
something
flip
like that.
or something.
Yeah.
But in general, like basketball is a street game. Do you know what I mean? Like, you see it all the time in TV shows, movies and stuff. Everyone's always, like on the street corner playing at those local courts and stuff down in Brooklyn or whatever. And, it just looks like a very easy thing, not an easy thing to master, certainly, but a game that you pick up in the streets. So the idea of it being NBA Street just seems a bit weird to me. I don't know.
No, I think that's fair. But I wonder if I would play it and have a similar sort of feeling of like, this could go further that I did with Def Jam Vendetta, and like the kind of wrestling trappings. Because I've just spotted my note to myself here, where for Def Jam Vendetta, where I was like, it's crying out for like a cage match or like a table, ladders and chairs one or something like that. None of that in it. And
isn't everything in life carried out for a cage match?
Well, quite possibly. They are words to live by. But like, I wonder if playing something like NBA Street, I would have a similar feeling where it's like, guys, you could be doing so much with this.
Yeah.
And perhaps they did or didn't for that exact reason, because it is like it's a very pick up and play game.
Yeah.
Like by its nature. So.
And I think so. FIFA Street. Did you ever play a FIFA Street? Because I know I've done a FIFA episode. We didn't really talk about FIFA Street really on there. And I remember playing it at my friend's house. I never owned one. Again, I was fine with it, and it was okay with friends, but I mean, I wasn't bothered about not owning one.
Yeah, I think I possibly played a little bit of one once, but I actually own the, they rebooted it. Later on, and did a kind of like more FIFA-esque version that was less cartoony and more like what nowadays would be like their futsal mode in full fat FIFA. So, which I guess
for you to say.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to what you were saying about value for money. Maybe nowadays it makes more sense to put the arcade mode in with the simulation. If it's going to be built on the same engine, you may as well, right?
Because EA are definitely about value for money.
Oh, absolutely.
Told you, I think I'm defending them. I'm not sure. I don't even know what I'm saying about them anymore. Anyway.
EA, bitch.
I want someone to walk around doing that to me. A very tight camera angle behind me at all times. I think I'd like that. Yeah. So, yeah, it feels a bit of a funny one, really, EA Big, because now we've been talking through it. Probably not as fond as memories as I thought I had.
That's because I've bought them all crashing down. That's what I do.
I don't think it's you. I think I've
Dream Smasher.
Yeah. That's how you get introduced in the pod now. I think that not his royal richness or whatever it was last week. I just think that they served a purpose, and it probably is right that they probably don't exist anymore. I think, and that I almost feel like that sets them up nicely for being in 10, 20 years' time. People being a bit more like, remember these were a thing.
Yeah.
And it feels to me the right place for them to live in.
Yeah, but like I think he says checking the time. How
much do I don't want to hear this?
No, it's because this is going to be one of those classic ones where I think out loud. Because like
that's what we're doing. That's podcast.
Yeah. Oh yeah. True. But like I think arcade sports games were definitely something that were a bit of a dying breed. And I think gradually they're kind of coming back a little bit. I think from what I've played of this,
it's like Rocket League now.
Well, like partly that, but like indie games as well, and like clever spins on name your sport here. But like I think from what I've seen of EA Big, like it was at its best when it just went all out. So like your SSXs and stuff like that, where it was like it properly went for it.
Yeah.
Whereas things like NFL Street 3 or Def Jam Vendetta, I would argue, where it feels a bit more grounded.
Yeah,
that was where like they weren't outrageous enough. And I think if they had possibly tapped into being more outrageous, you got to wonder if they would have, stuck around a bit longer or something like that. And I think if they were to make some kind of comeback or even, if you're doing arcade sports games nowadays, and I'm thinking primarily of NBA Jam or something like that, like, it's fucking ridiculous. You could play as Bill Clinton, but that's great. Like, that is what I want from an arcade
Mr.
game.
President, no!
I want a team of US presidents. I want to play Red Card and play as a team of fucking dolphins. That's what I want.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm here for. And it feels like EA Big had the potential to do that, but it fell short for me.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair enough. And I think that's a really good point, because I remember, so whilst we talk about SSX, and I spoke about at the start owning SSX at the start of the PlayStation 2 cycle for me personally, and then I never had Tricky. Dwayne, my friend, had Tricky, and I always felt like an urchin because I was like, SSX was way more simulation, whereas Tricky was fun, and it was I was like, oh, I've still got the shit one. But it wasn't shit; it just felt that way. And like I say, maybe with sports games, especially extreme sports games, the more, for me personally, the more I can mash a button just to see what might happen is where I enjoy myself, certainly. So, and I think we've probably got that across maybe in what we've talked about previously when we talked about Madden and FIFA and things, that they just feel too simulation-y and a bit too just like, beige. I think maybe. So, yeah, we like them when they're all, silver and gold and
spangly and ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. So, right, speaking of ridiculous, that's what we are usually a lot of the time. So, we'll get off on this pod, and we will see you all next week.
Cheers.
Cool. Bye-bye.